The glory of this present house will be greater than the glory of the former house, says the Lord Almighty. And in this place I will grant peace, declares the Lord Almighty.
If I remember correctly, a man called Thomas Rees, he was just here for 2 years early on, and he became one of the great historians of the Annibanwyr, the Congregational Church in Wales, writing about 5 volumes of history, culminating in 1897. And the amazing thing is, you know, the minister here wrote the history, but now there's a possibility to make history from this church, to take back area from the enemy, to have another victory in Llanelli. So I've got to say, I'm so excited. I'm excited about, this is going to be transformed. It's going to be, I don't know, it won't probably look like this, but it'll look modern and yet with a traditional gospel. And as we move on, it's such an important thing. Winning back, coming back to the places that were left. My mind goes to the Old Testament about the rebuilding of the temple. And the people coming back from Babylon and Ezra and Nehemiah, and they rebuild the places in ruins, but they rebuild. So all sorts of possibilities, and what a joy it is to stand here after all those years, looking back myself when I was 10, and knowing that here history has been made, history has been written, but history is being made right now.
When you think of the great figures in Llanelli's history, there are a few who come to mind. Maybe you're thinking of a Scarlets player, or a politician, or someone from the world of industry. But David Rees was undoubtedly one of those people. And the story of Siloah Chapel starts with him. David Rees became the minister of Capellals in 1829, and he inherited a membership of around 250 people. He was an evangelical and a radical. And during his lifetime, he built Capellals into a powerhouse of a chapel, into one of the most influential chapels in Wales, with a membership of around 800 people by the time he died. But that wasn't enough for David Rees. He wanted more. He wanted to extend further. And so out of Capellals came Park Church, Capel y Bryn, Capel y Doc, and Siloah. So in 1840, Siloah was chosen to be built in a booming industrial area of the town. At the time, Capellals was hovering around the 500 member mark, and the mother church sent 116 of its own people off to go and be part of this new church plant. Now, it's worth bearing in mind that the total population of Llanelli, although rapidly growing, was only 11,000 at this point. And yet you had Capellals and Zion planting these other churches all over the place. And Siloah was built with a capacity for 800 people. That's roughly the equivalent of 7% of the total town population at the time. Our forefathers were men and women of great faith. Siloah was formally consecrated on the 14th of January 1841, and its opening services were held on the 26th and 27th of April 1841. 50 years on, the original 116 members had become 490 members. By 1905, the membership stood at 635 adults and 372 children. And it's worth bearing in mind that Grandawyr, or attendees, were on top of this as well. Siloah had grown into a strong, thriving church, a centre of community, a place that was home to thousands of people in its lifetime. It was a place where the gospel was preached, that was a blessing to its community, and where God was glorified. But sadly, this growth would not continue through the 20th century. Siloah suffered decline, and by the summer of 2005, it was down to 18 members, and it decided to close. The Reverend Melville Davis conducted the final meeting and comforted the departing members by saying that the building may be gone, but the Master's people are not idle. We would like to concur, as the Master's people, that no, we have not been idle, but also the building has not gone yet. It still belongs to the kingdom of God, a kingdom of restoration, a kingdom of redemption, and a kingdom of resurrection.
When I came back from Bible college and started to work for church, one of the jobs that I had to do was grant applications. I have a way with words. I can sort of spin a story and, get stuff down on paper or whatever. And so it was just part of the job. We just had to basically pitch what we were going to do. The bid was for 1.4 million to get the project up and running, to get the building to a place where it was functional. But probably most of the funding was to meet regulations. So maybe what many people aren't aware of is that Siloah is a Grade 2 listed chapel. Which sounds nice because it sounds as though, the government and CADU want to preserve it. But actually, in reality, I think it looks a lot more like a death sentence on buildings, because the work that is required to meet their standards, and some of it is totally logical, some of it is important. It's about the way that buildings have been made and how you're meant to do the practical work to preserve the building. Is important, but some of it is illogical. So they want you to get the slate from the same mine quarry, and if it was listed with pink drainage pipes in the 60s, that's what was listed, and you'd have to replace it with pink drainage pipes today. So a lot of it is illogical and frustrating. And so it was recently this year, there was a CADU conference happening in the Ffwrnas Theatre in Llanelli. And so Ruth is involved in a lot of the grant side of things now, and so we thought, okay, this may be a really positive thing. And my hope was going, it was specifically about the future of the chapels in Wales, and with things like Park Church recently going up in flames, and so many chapels being shut down and derelict, and so many of them that are listed and people can't do anything with them. My hope was that we were going to go and they were going to say, good news, guys, we're relaxing the listings, we're going to change the way we're doing this, or we're going to release some funding to enable it to happen. That was my hope. That was not the reality of the day. and so we went in, you meet like-minded people. There were lots of tradesmen and specialists, and so people were sharing on different aspects, sort of different lectures going on. And it became quite clear early on that the rules were not changing. There was no more funding. It became an exercise in, this is what you have to do. We had stonemasons coming up and telling us exactly how you have to carve the stone to match the techniques that were used in those days. And so as the day went on, I became increasingly frustrated. I didn't stay until the end even. It got to a point where it was like, they had sort of workshops going on, and what was being spoken from the front, you could begin to feel the tension in the room that wasn't what people were feeling, but nothing was being done. And so I didn't go to the second workshop. So I came back to church, and it was chucking it down with rain, and it was, in literature what we'd call pathetic fallacy. It was echoing my mood, and it was sort of miserable outside and windy and raining. And I came to church because I knew I needed to go down to Siloah. And so I came to pick up the keys and I just drove down there. Actually, no, God's hand is on this.
Yeah, and that's why it's like the thing of it's doing it from the inside out.
Yeah.
Because like, if we can get it so that, alright, somehow get the roof to be stable, everything else then, we can just do it gradually.
Yeah.
Because like you do, that is the way you do it.
And then it's like, okay, we start here, and like the big push then would be, right, get those two things done, get this bit done, right. The next thing is then, right, let's sort out that.
And I don't think it's going to come from grants.
No.
Like literally reading from Haggai, God's like, the gold is mine, the silver is mine. I think we can take away the pressure of, I don't think the government needs to be involved. Somehow he's
I don't want
bringing it.
any strings anyway.
No.
So,
No, it's not worth the price.
no.
It's not.
No, this should belong to the kingdom.
Yeah.
that's-
And it's like if a bunch of miners could raise 600,000
Mm.
to build these chapels, it was the local people contributing.
Oh, see, but I mean, I just feel in in my bones that we are not, like, this is not meant to be knocked down and become flats.
No.
I just feel it in my bones
I
that
think God
this is
stopped
meant
it.
to be a
Yeah.
church.
Yeah.
End of.
Yeah. God stopped us changing the purpose. What was it called? They had like a trust on it or something, didn't they? That it had to be used.
A covenant.
A covenant, that's it. We couldn't lift the covenant.
We did three, but it's like...
The door was shut.
But it is a bit like... It's like a boomerang. We've kept trying to throw it away. It just keeps coming back. We're not going to be idle. Upon the close of the chapel, the remaining trustees decided to sell Siloah on to become flats or whatever. But that ran into issues, and so eventually Siloah remained in the kingdom and was offered to 21st Century Church for the price of £1 plus legal fees. It was an incredible gift from heaven. But the story since then has been of 14 years of battle for Siloah. At the beginning of the process, the front of Siloah was listed, which is not a big problem. We weren't intending on making any changes to that anyway. But during the process, without the knowledge of the leadership at the time, the listing was extended to the inside as well. That meant the costs were raised greatly, and it hampered our ability to renovate Siloah and make it fit to be a living church in the 21st century. In 2008, we managed to get planning to renovate the building, and an extensive grant application was prepared to help meet the cost of this project. But the application was turned down. As the years went on, the building deteriorated. At one point, the roof was so badly damaged by an autumn storm, the tiles started to fly off the roof and the road had to be closed. The church had to take out another mortgage loan to temporarily fix the roof. On Good Friday a few years ago, a fire broke out that nearly burnt down the whole chapel. It was only saved through a miraculous intervention from the fire brigade. Now, there's so much more to this story, but for now, it's fair to say that during all of these battles and trials, the thought started to creep in, is this even worth it? Is this doable? Is it time to maybe try and get rid of Siloah and try and sell it on? Yet Siloah seems to be stubbornly sticking to kingdom territory. The truth is, I believe we are meant to have Siloah. It is meant to be a chapel once again. It is meant to come back to life. After becoming the pastor of 21st Century Church, I took the keys one day and went down to Siloah to get a feel for it myself. And as I walked in, I felt the weight of it, the weight of being the next minister of Siloah effectively. And as I looked around the place, I had an overwhelming feeling that this was not meant to be sold on. It was not meant to become flats. It was meant to live again. It was meant to be a church. It was meant to be a place where the dry bones come to life again.
And so you go in And with your natural eyes, it should have just added to the sense of hopelessness. Because you walk in and the first thing is, you've got chains on the gates. It's clearly, windows are boarded up. This building is not in use. And you go into the porch, and by now it's so water damaged that it just looks a mess. And then you go in and there's been a new room that's been made, and it's kind of a little haven when you go in there because it's got electricity and it's got heating and carpets and seats. And so, I went in there and it was the first time I'd seen it finished, and so that was like, great, this is a little bit of progress. But I didn't want to stay there, so I kind of walked straight through more or less into the chapel because that's the heart of the building. And so I walked around and I went up to the pulpit. And I stood in this grand pulpit, with this amazing organ behind, and I looked around, half praying, God, please don't let the pigeons come back in. Don't let the wind blow the rain in. And you're looking around and it just was such a mess. And I just couldn't help but cry. And I just stood in that pulpit and I just wept. And I know in the natural we don't have the funds. I know in the natural we don't have the resources, the team, the skilled labourers, that we don't have enough to do what's required, if anyone's watching this, go 1.4 million, come and have a chat to me afterwards. But in the natural, I know that that's not realistic. And I walked around the building and I walked upstairs, and I kind of just could see, how the stairs have been they've been shaped by the generations of people that have walked here, and their lives have been a part of Siloah, and how many hundreds or thousands of footsteps have just etched into the place. And you just think, all those people, in its heyday, there wasn't enough room in Siloah. It's an 800-seat. The stories are that people were sitting in the aisles just to get into church, and now that's not the narrative of the building. And so I went back into the nice room where it was dry, and I put on Michael W. Smith, Let It Rain, and not literally, it's already chucking it down, don't bring it in, but spiritually it's such a barren space where there's no life, where it just looks dead and hopeless. And I just sang it and I prayed and I just wept. I just cried, and I cried for the state of the building, but I cried more for the people that were not there, for the people that were absent, for the hundreds that should have been there, for Siloah and Seaside and Llanelli, for the multitudes that need to be reached.
Yeah.
And it is like I was sitting in here praying, but it's like you're in this nice safe space, and then you're looking out and it's like this mix of potential and the vision of what it could be, and the reality.
It still looks cool. It does look
cool. There's a lot to admire, but then you've got the reality of the work.
I just feel like if you painted if the walls were all done, and you just cleaned up all the rubbish and just had give it a good clean, it would look awesome.
Yeah, I mean, it would be,
I know there's more structural work.
Yeah.
That's the thing, unfortunately.
Still, it would look much better. Yeah. But it is like the Haggai thing is like, it's like have faith and work.
Yeah.
It's like the two. That's what God commands.
Yeah.
To get on with the job at hand.
Yeah.
It is the time. It's difficult to explain, but God met me in that place, and I felt God speak and encourage. And I think when I was feeling so discouraged from, 6 years of failed grant applications and limited progress and just problems, where slates are flying off the roof, but we haven't got 100k to replace the roof. And, oh great, pigeons live there. Oh great, there's a rat and a pigeon who've had a fight to the death in the pulpit. And it's like, from years of just rubbish, I felt so discouraged. And I just felt the encouragement of God that just met me in that place. And I just felt as though heaven was saying, it's a question of timing. It's not a question of whether God wants to, that actually God loves those people far more than we ever could. And it's God's heart to be in that community and to bring change and to bring salvation. And that it's just a question of timing. And we just need to keep being faithful in watering the seed. And so I looked around and I just prayed. I said, oh God, God, I pray that there'd be worship sung here again, and that there would be the place would be full, and that the word would be preached. And in the little room, there's a window, and I kind of looked through the window at the pulpit, and I was like, oh God, I want the word to be preached then. And it was really clear. I just felt as though God was saying, well, go preach it. And so I'm like, okay, what have I got for Sunday? I haven't got my notes on me. What do I need to go and preach? But actually, God had already been stirring my heart to the prophets. And I'd already been reading around the rebuilding of the temple. And so I didn't have my Bible on me, but I had my phone. And so I just went up into the pulpit and I just looked up Haggai, and I just stood there and I read out the whole thing, and it was probably the worst delivered sermon in the world. I'm just crying, trying to get it out, looking around at the mess and just trying to read it out through, I'm like squinting because I'm crying. But I just read out the whole of Haggai, and it's only 2 chapters. And I just, as I said, read it out through tears. But I think there was a power and a prophetic edge to reading that passage in that building once more, that we don't need to worry about the details, that actually it all belongs to God anyway, and He's done far greater before. And the ruin of the temple in Jerusalem was far more absolute than the ruin of Siloah. And so for God, this is no big deal. For us, it seems impossible, but He is the God who moves mountains. He is the God of the impossible. And so I guess my heart and my prayer for this crazy story of just trying to get Siloah to become something, and these years of just not seeing any fruit, is that actually we have been sowing seed, and it is a question of timing, and God's timing is perfect, ours is not. And His heart is to see the lost saved, and is to see Wales transformed, and is to see revival. And so I think that we need to, as God had told them, do the same, that we need to be strong and work, because it's coming in His time. It's coming.
Practically, the plan is to occupy and restore the building bit by bit. We've already begun with a new room that was created, and we're soon to launch prayer meetings on location as well. But spiritually, I'm believing Haggai 2 verse 9 to be a word over Siloah. In this verse, the prophet is speaking of the rebuilding of the temple in Jerusalem. And he notes how the glory of the present house is going to be greater than the glory of the former house. He declares how the Lord Almighty is going to grant peace in that place. And we're believing that the future of Siloah is going to be more glorious than its past. Secondly, we're believing that this is going to be backed by the Lord Almighty. The literal translation here is Yahweh Armies. It's God's war title. He will fight for Siloah, and His authority is above every authority. And thirdly, this will be a place where God grants peace. The word for peace that's found in this verse, in the Welsh it's tangnefedd, and it comes from the Hebrew word shalom. And that word is about more than a feeling of inner peace. It's about a sense of wholeness, about a sense of things being as they should be, of all being well. So church, I'm excited to really get started. I'm believing that Siloah is going to be a place, a fountain, a well of God's peace that flows out and blesses the wider community. I'm believing it's going to be a place that God fights for. And I'm believing it's going to be a place that displays His glory. Ni'n diolch I ti am pobl fel David Rees. Ni'n diolch I ti am pobl oedd moyn ymestyn y teyrnas mewn I ran arall o'r ardal yn Llanelli. Ni'n diolch I ti ar gwaith am hyder nhw, am ffydd nhw, yn plannu y lle gyda lot o bobl yn gadael un capel I do fan hyn. Ni'n diolch I ti am y gwaith a'r ffydd, a'r abedd, a'r gweddiau, a popeth sydd wedi mynd mewn I hwn o'r blaen ar y gwydd. Ni'n diolch I ti ar gwydd am pob person na dod I nabod ti fan hyn, am pob person na ffyno I achad fan hyn, am pob person ar y gwydd. O hwn oedd cartre nhw ar y gwydd. Ni'n diolch I ti am popeth na digwydd o blaen. Ni'n diolch I ti am bod hwn wedi bod yn lle lle ti wedi cael ei glodfori ar y gwydd. Bod hwn wedi bod yn rhywbeth sydd gyda twf a gyda dylanwad a gogoniant iddo fe. Ni'n diolch I ti am popeth sydd wedi bod yn arglwydd nawr. ni'n siarad, fi'n gobeithio, a ni'n proffwydi, ni'n gweud dros y dyfod ar arglwydd bod mwy yn mynd i ddod. A bod e'n mynd i fod arglwydd mwy o gogoniant yn y tŷ sydd i ddod a beth sydd wedi bod. Arglwydd fi'n cyndro beth sydd wedi gweud yn y gair, yn Haggai arglwydd. Taw, mae hwn yn mynd i fod yn tŷ o tangnefedd arglwydd. Tŷ o tangnefedd i'r ardal hyn arglwydd, i'r dref. Ond mae'n mynd i dod wrth tŷ yn ymladd dros dy fe. A ni'n diolch i ti bod dyma ni'n ei poeni. Ti yw'r un sy'n ymladd dros y lle hyn. Ti yw'r un sy'n ymladd dros dy fe. Ti sydd yn edrych ar ôl y lle hyn. A ti wedi ymladd dros dy fe. Hyd yn oed pan ni wedi rhoi an ar yr adeilad. Ti wedi cadw fe am ddiffyn e. A ni'n diolch i ti. A ni'n gofyn ar ysbryd glân. Bydde ti'n dod ar glaw o'r nefoedd ar y gwydd. Bydde ti'n disgyn unwaith eto. Ar gwydd ni'n gofyn am y pethau fel pethau practical ar y gwydd. Ni'n gofyn am yr arian i ddod ar y gwydd. Ni'n gofyn am y pobol i ddod. Ni'n gofyn am y gweithwyr i ddod. Ond ar y gwydd ni'n gofyn hefyd am y ffydd ar y gwydd. Ni'n gofyn ar y gwydd am y bendith ar y gwydd yn y rhan ysbrydol ar y gwydd. Ni'n gofyn bydde ti yn neud y ffordd ar y gwydd. Dered yn gael ei on ar ysbryd glân, cwymp ar y lle yn eto. Dered y neiniad arno ni, arno y adeilad, arno'r prosiect i gyd. Ar gwydd ni'n gwybod ti yw'r un sy'n gallu dod ar esgyrn sydd wedi marw i ddiw unwaith eto. A ni'n gofyn ar y gwydd bydde ti'n dod ar esgyrn hyn, ar adeilad hyn. Nath nhw'n gweud yn yr oedfa diwetha bod yr adeilad wedi mynd, ond ar y gwydd ni'n gweud na, mae ddim wedi mynd. Ti'n mynd i atgyfodi fe. Chos na pwy i ti ar y gwydd, a ni'n gofyn ar y gwydd i'r lle hyn atgyfodi unwaith eto i fod yn ti sy'n cyhoeddi dy enw di a dy fengil di dros y dre unwaith eto. Ni'n gofyn ar y gwydd, bydd hwn yn lle, neu bydd miloedd yn dod i nabod ti, a ffindo iachadwriaeth, a ffindo ar y gwydd dy hedd, a ffindo dy presenoldeb di. A gwydd ni'n gofyn bydde ti'n cael dy ffordd unwaith eto yn y lle hyn. Ni'n rhoi llawn ni lan a gweud ni mwyn fod yn rhan o fe ni mewn. Helpa ni ro doethineb i ni, eneinia ni ha. A bendithia y gwaith sydd i ddod ar gwydd. Agor y drysedd eisiau agor. Ni'n rhoi ei ti a ni'n gofyn dilyd y deyrnas a wyled y wyllus megis yn Siloah fel mae yn y nef. Ni'n gofyn yn enw Iesu Grist.